All right, here we are. My main man, JP, who I don't think I've seen in the physical form, geez, man, maybe
Yeah,
since varsity.
a very long time. I've not been back to South Africa since 2014.
Yeah, and
So
I don't think when you have been, I've seen you much. But yeah, we've kind of,
I feel like it was Kai's wedding.
yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, that was, when was that? 2007, maybe.
Yeah, very, very
But
long.
we've always kind of kept in touch online. You've been always very interactive on whichever platform, be it Facebook, LinkedIn. I think is
Yeah.
the more recent one. So I've always felt a connection with you. I think we've always kept in some kind of contact. We followed each other, kind of what we do work wise. But yeah, I mean, definitely, have a big fondness for you from the days of playing basketball as well, which was my big love. And I think you're taller than me. So,
No, no, I'm quite tall. Back then I was at St. Albans College, and you weren't in the same school as me, but you used to come there and practice basketball, and you had these big goggles.
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
who's the Forrest Grant looking motherfucker?
Yeah, because at that point I was quite good friends with Auro, and it was the Row and Mo show.
Well, I remember he was really good at shooting. He used to always get
Yeah,
me.
and he had his own sort of half court at his farm out in,
Oh,
like,
okay.
where, because his family was growing, doing plants. So yeah, that he kind of got me into it, and that was when we started with the Sharks and had the independent team, and then I basically played for the German school and played against Boys High in the finals in Matric, for the Pretoria League. So, but yeah, introduce yourself and kind of what you do and what you're into and what you're doing at the moment. Would love to get to know
Okay.
more about that.
Okay, well, maybe what I'm doing at the moment is the first thing, and that'll like help explain why I explain my story so well. At the
Yeah,
moment,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
unemployed,
Okay,
so I'm living in London. And being
okay,
unemployed, I've been interviewing for a lot of jobs, so that's why
okay.
I can tell you my story. It's like something I've been doing a lot recently.
Yeah.
So obviously, I said I went to St Albans College, and I then studied at University of Pretoria. I did a BCom accounting, and first year was the best 4 years of my life. And and I eventually got my BCom, got through it all, and I
Yeah.
decided I've had enough of studying, and I went to London, where I arrived with my BCom degree, thinking I'm the smartest thing on earth, and
Okay.
quickly realized that people in London don't care if you have a degree, because quite a lot of people have a degree, and the first thing they wanted to know is what experience do I have, and then I
Mm.
didn't have any experience. And then eventually I managed to get a job, and I was, making photocopies and making coffee kind of level.
Okay. Yeah.
And, but it was giving me enough income to sort of pay my bills. And about a year and a half later, I thought, no, this is not going to work. I need to do more with my life. And I'd been contracting all over the show, just earning income, living hand to mouth in London, but also having a good time.
Okay.
And I knew my visa was going to run out, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? So I always felt like London my dad always said to me, I should have gone to the army. And I feel like London was my going to the army. I learned how to sort of fend for myself, do my
Fend for
work,
yourself to survive.
appreciate the value of money, all of that stuff, right? So
Okay.
I went back to South Africa, and I joined a firm called Watermark Auditors. They were an audit firm that audited non-listed small and medium enterprises in Joburg.
Okay. Mm.
They were based at the time in Illovo, but they subsequently moved to Fourways. And that's where I cut my teeth in the world of auditing. And in the meantime, I did my honors degree at UNISA.
Okay.
Then I did the Institute of Chartered Accountant exam.
Mm.
And then I did the Board of Auditor exam, but then I never passed the Board of Auditor exam.
Okay. So were you a psycha member, so a CA?
Well, I passed the psycha exam, but I'm not a CA because I don't have the RA. I didn't pass
Oh, I see. So those are two
you have to
separate.
pass both.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You have to pass the Board of Auditors exam and the Institute of Chartered Accountant exam to become a to be able to register.
Okay.
So because I didn't have the Board of Auditors, I'm not a chartered accountant.
Okay.
But then in the meantime, at that point, I was an audit supervisor. I'd been at the firm about 5 years.
Mm.
And then my best friend, Jason, who was living in London, had moved to Hong Kong. and he was working for Barclays Capital.
Mm.
At that time, Barclays Capital was doing a huge expansion in Asia, aggressively on the sort of their risk-taking business side, which is the investment bank.
Okay.
And anyway, because they were expanding, Jason phoned me and he said, "Listen, they're hiring like mad here. Have you got a CV? Then maybe we can put your CV on the pile and see what happens." So I did that, and then I got an interview. So I had to go to ABSA Capital in Sandton. At that time, ABSA was owned by Barclays.
Okay.
So I went to ABSA Capital, and I had to sort of time it in between audits so that like lunchtime I pull in at ABSA Capital, because that was 6 o'clock in the evening in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So that suited them because it's kind of after work for them to interview me.
Yeah.
And then I remember I'd like leave the client and put on my tie, put on a jacket.
Wow.
Like, I didn't want anyone
because while you're auditing, that's quite a big job. You're sitting at the client.
I was a supervisor, so I was driving between audits. I had maybe 2 or 3 audits on at any time with different teams, and I had to sort of check on their work. So I would coordinate it so that when I'm driving from one client to the other, ABSA Capital's on the way.
Okay.
And I sort of stop, and I did.
In Joburg traffic, which is quite
hectic. Of course, nobody knows, because you don't want anyone to know you're interviewing. And in South Africa, you're not going to walk around in a suit and blazer and stuff. Like, I just had a collared shirt at the audits.
Okay.
But my jacket and tie was in the car, so I would like be putting the stuff on and run into ABSA Capital and pretend like I'm some high-flying hotshot or something. They're like, "Yes, sir, come into the meeting room. Yeah, your appointment with Hong Kong is waiting." And I'm like, "Dude, coming for an interview."
Amazing.
Obviously, the people at work at ABSA are also not all in suits and ties, so they're also pretty chill. So they're like, "Yes, this must be some hotshot or whatever."
Yeah.
Hong Kong or whatever.
Yeah.
And so then I had the interviews, and I did that 3 different times. I had 3 different interviews, and then I just kept progressing, and I got the job.
Okay.
It was very, very quick, and they needed me there within like 2 or 3 weeks or a month or something. So I resigned immediately. Sold like whatever little bit of stuff I had. I think my pensions and stuff paid out because I was leaving. I somehow could get my hands on the money or something. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
I got my hands on the money, and that was exactly how much was still owing on my credit card and my loans and stuff. So I settled debt, and I basically left South Africa with. I think I arrived in Hong Kong with 3,000 rand in my pocket.
Wow.
And at that time, the rand and the Hong Kong dollar was 1 to 1.
Okay.
3,000 Hong Kong dollars.
What year was that?
That was in the quarterfinals of the Soccer World Cup 2010.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I watched the quarterfinals in Hong Kong.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
But I watched the other games, and I would say it was all like World Cup mood and stuff. And I left I never went to any of the games because I wasn't sure when I would have to leave, so I didn't bother buying tickets.
Oh, my word. Okay.
Anyway, and then I left, and I went to Hong Kong, and having lived in London before, I thought I knew what culture shock was. And I can tell you now that English are very much like South Africans. There's not much difference between us. Hong Kong is a culture shock. That was a whole different world. And an amazing place, and I had a wonderful experience there. But anyway, I joined Barclays, and I got thrown into my world of investment banking. I was working in prime services, doing product control. And at a huge organization like Barclays, basically what I ended up just being was like learning to become a spreadsheet jockey.
Okay.
Working spreadsheets all day long and making sure that everything ties and agrees to and reconciles and all that kind of stuff. Okay. And but it was good. My Excel skills got very good, as a result. Yeah. After a year and a half, I left product control, went in at Barclays into financial control for 2 years. So that was more legal entity controller. And, doing month end and accounting, proper accounting. Okay. And then I left there and I went to a company called CLSA, Credit Lyonnais Securities Asia. And they hired me to start their product control function. They didn't have one. Okay. Then we kind of built one from scratch.
Okay, because you had that experience at Barclays.
Well, kind of. I had the experience, but I'm still a little bit green, if I'm being honest.
Green, okay, yeah. But you kind of took on the challenge.
But I took on the challenge, and I think that's where my bosses also saw that I have a bit of a flair for managing projects. Okay. And on the side, I was managing treasury projects. Okay. Even though I was technically working in product control.
Okay.
And I did that for 3 years. And then CLSA had been bought by the biggest investment bank in China called CITIC Securities.
Okay.
And CITIC Securities was going to integrate with CLSA. And basically their sort of vision was that CLSA would be China's gateway to the world, and CITIC would be the world's gateway into China.
Okay.
That's sort of why they were integrating and merging.
Okay.
But obviously this meant now there was going to be 2 treasury departments and 2 product control departments and 2 operations departments. So they had to integrate.
Mm.
So my boss called me and he said to me, listen, this other product control team, their head has been there for very long and they have much more complex products. So he thinks it's better that I move out of product control and I'm not trying to have a political fight with this guy about who's running the show and that.
Because otherwise you might have also just been like retrenched or something.
Yeah, well, it was both me and my boss, because my boss was actually the head of product control, but it was just the 2 of us, and we'd been building this team, and so both of us were given sort of this messaging. So my boss went to become the head of fixed income,
okay,
and I went into a new team called the finance transformation team,
okay,
right, which was just me and this other guy called Billy. But Billy was from IT department.
Okay.
So the idea was kind of like he would handle all the IT stuff in this finance department, within the finance department. And I would be like the guy that understands how finance works, but that talks to Billy so that we can make this work with IT, and we can work together.
Okay.
And so that was our finance transformation. And I did finance transformation project management for the next 3 years.
Okay.
And I think it worked very well, specifically because in Asia, people are quite like gentle and soft and not forthcoming. They kind of keep to themselves, almost like introverts.
Mm.
And I'm kind of the guy that insists on putting every controversial matter on the table.
Okay.
But that's important in project management. Somebody, we need to know what's going to potentially blow up our face.
Yeah.
So they liked me for the project management. And then in my last year, I left finance department and went into the executive office, which was basically CLSA no longer had a CEO and a COO and that. They just had an executive office that was the go-between between Beijing and CLSA in Hong Kong.
Right.
So I went into that office, still doing project management, but now it was not just projects for the finance department, it was for the whole firm. So the stakeholders were multiple department stakeholders.
Mm.
I did that for a year. Those projects were typically regulatory change.
Okay.
So when there's new laws from regulators, then you have to change your systems and your products and whatever to comply. But then that impacts every department, and you have to run a project to do that.
Mm.
So that's what I did. In the meantime, though, I'd been doing first of all, in 2019, middle of 2019 somewhere, they started to protest in Hong Kong.
Okay, yeah, I kind of recall.
And it was about having universal suffrage and the right to vote and that type of thing, which had been promised to the people of Hong Kong back when the British Sino Declaration was signed or something, that they would work towards this universal suffrage. But what was happening was, in reality, was China was, instead of China having been over time opening up to the world, China was now trying to make Hong Kong more like China.
Yeah. But
in 1984 to 97, Hong Kong had made up like 90% of the Chinese economy.
Sure.
But now, fast forward, Hong Kong only makes up 5% of the economy. China is massive now,
Yeah.
So the leverage situation had changed, and therefore politically, Beijing had a lot more clout, and they were not interested in changing their model to become like a Western-style model. They were more interested in making Hong Kong become like them. And anyway, there's definitely, if you've experienced the style of the Communist Party and the way that they work, you could feel like the people protested, and then the next day there was like military in the streets, and you suddenly felt like, okay, hang on, freedom of speech is not a thing everywhere. Like there's some places don't tolerate it or whatever.
So did you start getting a bit worried then?
Yeah, I was definitely worried, and even like little things, like you used to, like if you were talking to people on WhatsApp about your viewpoint about something, you start to feel like, I wonder if anybody's watching my WhatsApp and knows what I'm saying, and what will be the repercussions. And so you, even on WhatsApp, you like politically correct the whole time to your friends or whatever, because you just and I don't know, I'll never know if anybody was actually watching or not, but there was definitely a mood like that I felt, at least, and a few people I spoke to felt like that.
Okay.
But then 3 months later, COVID hit.
Okay.
Right. So we all were on lockdown and stuff anyway, and the protests died down.
Okay.
But at that same moment, I had also started an MBA.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I was doing an MBA at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology.
Okay.
And that was rated one of the best universities in Asia and the number one in Hong Kong and whatever. And so I went there and I thought, let me go do a proper MBA at a proper university. And it set me back a hell of a lot of money. And I was like, but I'm going to do this thing because it's all kind of based on your environment. In Hong Kong, academics is quite a big deal. The people, everybody you meet has got like a whole alphabet next to their name, of like how much stuff they've studied in the past and whatever. So I thought it would be a good investment, and I went into this MBA. But then as soon as I went into MBA, and one of the big selling points is that you will build a great network and be very connected and whatever. And I went into this MBA, and then COVID hit, and it suddenly became everything was on Zoom.
Yeah.
And we had to do our lectures on
Which
Zoom.
Definitely, I think for an MBA, apparently, it's not great.
It's a big kick in the nuts.
And
but they were not interested in refunding anybody, or you couldn't drop out or whatever. They were like, no, you won't get your money back. So I persisted, and I did it. And from an academic point of view, it was one of the greatest times of my life. I learned so much stuff in MBA. It was definitely super interesting, much more interesting than when I studied accounting. Like accounting was so narrow and just focused on very, very specific subjects, but MBA was much more broad. In the background, I'd also done CFA level 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So I kind of had all that sort of financial knowledge, but then MBA was just like, there was also marketing and operations management and like other stuff. I did management consulting. I went into private equity.
Yeah, some people seem to sort of dumb down the benefits that an MBA can actually give you from a theoretical point of view, because they often say that it's people do it just for career advancement, and if you really want to know about business, you should kind of start your own. But I mean, you'd run pretty big projects, and a lot of running projects within a company, I think, is often almost like running a little business within a company. So, I mean, would you agree that from what you're saying, is that you're saying that an MBA is actually quite useful in terms of what it gives you in terms of...
I think it's fair that everybody first acknowledge that we all have bias. Right?
Yeah.
So everybody that's studied and has degrees will probably say that, it's worthwhile and it's a good thing. And everybody that never studied and just went out and made it on their own will say, I didn't need a degree. So
didn't need a degree, yeah.
So there's, first of all, there's bias.
Yeah.
But if we acknowledge that, I think there's merit in saying that if you've gone to get an education somewhere and learned something, then it saves you the trouble of having to figure it out on your own.
Right.
So maybe the reason why a lot of people might still believe in hiring people with degrees or whatever is because they feel that instead of me taking 3 years to get this guy up to speed, while he sort of goes up a natural learning curve, because he's already gone through a lot of lessons learned. And within project management, we have this. We have at the end of every project, we have a lessons learned from the project, like what was the mistakes we made, what can we do better next time. And when you start a project, you first look at what was lessons learned before, so we don't go make those same mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what you can get from an education. It's just that ability to say, okay, well, I'm already aware of some of the stuff. When I come across it in the workplace, I will already have a good sense of the direction of where to go. And therefore, it takes me 6 months to get up the learning curve instead of 2 years or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Right? Makes sense.
And I think that's the real benefit of a degree. I don't think that it's like, I don't think everybody with a degree just has a leg up. I don't think all hiring managers, some of them cares about it, some of them don't care. And that's also random. You never know.
You never know. Yeah.
It just depends how they feel and what their biases are.
Yeah. But you enjoyed it.
So I enjoyed MBA. And what I would say about MBA was people ask me, was MBA difficult? And I think MBA was really easy.
Mm.
But what I mean by that is CFA was really hard. Like I had to sort of lock myself in a room and like number crunch to mad and work through like hundreds of exercises and then go write the exam. And then even then I just sort of scraped through or whatever, you know. It was very, very like individualistic effort.
Yeah.
You know, I pass or I fail.
Yeah.
But MBA, like half of it is not like actually the studying and writing the exams and that stuff counts like 30% of your overall grade or something. A lot of it is coursework and projects that you do with an assignment that you have to do with groups. So I think the best example I have is when I did management consulting.
Yeah.
As a subject. Every week we did a subject like root cause analysis or hypothesis testing or whatever, right? And they would give you a whole case about a real company, Cathay Pacific or something, you know, and a whole problem or whatever, and you'd have to go do a root cause analysis or whatever. But next week when we come to class, you have to do a PowerPoint presentation, your whole group. You know, in sort of like executive summary, introduction, like a consultant would do, like a sales pitch kind of thing. And this is, and you're graded sort of on a curve against your peers. So everybody's putting a lot of effort in, but we have to prepare these slides. But we're all working. We all have day jobs, right?
Yeah.
We have to be ready by next week Wednesday, right? You know? So getting together on a weekend, and then we draw out the root cause analysis on a whiteboard. But then everybody argues, and they're like, "No, that's not how it goes. This is how it goes." And you'll be amazed. Human beings have such different perspectives.
Yeah,
it's like I was convinced I'm right, and then somebody else will draw a completely different diagram or whatever, and they have a completely different take on a problem. You know that makes me stop and think. You know, I might still be right.
Yeah,
but I have to first prove why is he wrong or vice versa. And this was the same for him. He was looking at what I have. And that experience of sort of how different people thinks about stuff and approach problems.
But that is more how the real work life is often in any event, right? I mean, it's often about that on a larger scale. Sure, if you're an investment analyst and you need to do CFA, a lot of your decisions will be, and a lot of your thinking will be done on your own. But you're probably still also going to have a team that you're going to have to bounce things off with. So approaching education in the way that you're talking about is probably more in line with how the real world works in the work environment. Because I've always thought, just from a school perspective, you're never allowed to do projects together, and actually copying from someone else or getting someone else's input on your assignment is probably more practical than you doing it totally on your own. So I think, that is more how the real world works.
Yeah, and you have to make time for people and understand their perspectives. And that was, to me, if I say what was hard about MBA, it wasn't actually like the content is difficult to understand. You have to have a little bit of, it's not easy to understand, but it's not like as nearly as complex as CFA was. But you had to make time for people, you had to be patient with people, and you had to deliver by Wednesday next week. And that sort of pressure the whole time. And it was never ending. It was relentless, week after week for 2 years, just like that the whole time, you know?
Wow.
So that was kind of what makes MBA hard, if you ask me. It wasn't really the content, the academic content.
And then you finished it when?
So I finished it in 2021, but just before I finished it, I finished in August 2021 in about, I think, April of 2021, April or May. My wife, although my wife is from the Philippines, her stepfather is British, and when he adopted her, she got a British passport, so she's a British citizen. And so she said to me, with all this protesting going on, and then during COVID, obviously the Chinese approach to dealing with COVID was quite hardcore as well. You know, they had QR codes everywhere, and you were being tracked and all sorts of stuff. And everybody had a mask on, and if you don't have your mask, it's a $5,000 fine. And it was really, really intense. And she said, "Listen, maybe it's time we just go somewhere else." We'd always wanted to move to Australia.
Okay.
But Australia has always had a hard border control, and during COVID, it was impossible.
Yeah.
So the British passport was the best option. And since I worked in financial services, London is anyway a better option than Sydney. And and so my wife came across to and I stayed behind because I had to apply for a spouse visa
Okay.
to come. And the way that it works is I have to apply first, and then only when I get it, I can come.
Okay.
So then I stayed alone for 5 or 6 months in Hong Kong while this process ran, and then I came over.
Okay.
When I came over, my wife already had a job, and she was like settled, and we had a flat, and everything was cool. And I'd left Hong Kong, so I cashed out all my retirement savings and everything. And I came with a healthy amount of money and a good memory of Hong Kong. I'd achieved an MBA. I'd met my wife. We'd traveled all over Asia. I'd had a glamorous and glorious 12 years.
Wow.
And so I had quite a lot to show for leaving Hong Kong. And I remember actually when I left Hong Kong, the last night I stayed at the Grand Hyatt.
Okay. Wow.
I had this nice balcony overlooking Victoria Harbour. And then I had like a Maybach fetch me at the hotel and drive me.
Maybach, wow.
Well, the Grand Hyatt, they have these.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then I got to the airport and I was flying business class, flatbed into London, and I really felt good about myself, right?
Okay.
And I'd done well for myself. I could be proud of myself. I got to the UK. Then there was this course I'd always wanted to do about trading at the Institute of Trading and Portfolio Management.
Okay.
And I did that, and I learned about like what does professional traders do, and how do they trade, and what kind of information do they look at, and that kind of stuff. And it was interesting, but I also learned there's a hell of a lot more to trading than meets the eye if you want to do it properly.
Yeah.
So, these people who think that they day traders and going to sit in a coffee shop and quickly make $1 million on their app on their phone, like, nah, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
So I finished that, and then I started looking for a job again because the bills were starting to rack up, and I needed to start to find a job. And I've now been looking for a job for about a year, and it's been a very, very painful process. I've had very, very little response from recruiters or applications that I do directly. The only interviews I've had was via people I knew that put in a recommendation somewhere for me.
Wow.
That has been difficult. Like one of the interviews was with BioNTech that made the COVID vaccine in Germany. And so I would have had to move to Germany for that job if I'd gotten that one.
Jeez.
In the end, I didn't. After a few rounds of interviews, they decided against it, and their big issue was just that I don't speak German. They preferred to have somebody speaking German, and that makes sense. It's a finance transformation role that they had, so it made sense. It was a pity because they have so much money after COVID. That company blown up from a little startup into basically they were a company that had a turnover of around 400 million euros. And a net profit of 0, breaking even.
Wow.
And after a year later, after COVID, they had 20 billion euros in revenue. Most of it in the bank, right? No debt. And now, and it blown up and gone global. And they were like, wow, we need to have finance transformation because this is too big now.
Too big now, yeah.
So they needed a finance transformation guy. And anyway, so I was keen to go there because I thought, yes, if I've got this much money, I can build a finance team and department that's like the voice,
Yeah, the Rolls Royce. Like you've got no budget constraints. You can build the world-class team.
What problem with the project? So I was like, this could be really good. And at this time, all this AI had just come out, ChatGPT and Bard and this stuff. So I was like sort of running my thoughts through ChatGPT and seeing what does it come out with, and sort of already developing the whole finance team, how it would look and everything, But
sure,
but it's so nice. Those AIs are really good if you want to sense check what you know. Because sense checking what you know, then you can figure out if it's right or wrong. You'll know the AI is making a mistake. Yeah,
because your input's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Because
input's good.
You've got the knowledge already.
Yeah, and like if I said to you, how many letters are there in the alphabet, right? Or what are the letters in the alphabet, right? I can't remember them all. Let's just say I can't remember them all, but I have a good sense. If you tell me, epsilon and beta, then I will be like, no, that's not in the English alphabet. I don't know what the 26 are, but I know it's not that.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
But if you tell me A, B, C, D to G to Z, then I will be like, yeah, oh yes, I remember now. That's,
No, I remember. Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
You just
so,
need a bit of a gap filler.
yeah, I just need that gap filler, exactly. And I find the AI is really good for that. Anyway, so I've had an interview here and there. I had an interview with Goldman Sachs that I thought went fantastic, and then I just never heard from them again. So, I don't know, and I really
But that's quite hectic. I mean, you've come from quite a serious Hong Kong financial services career to London, and you don't seem to be getting any kind of
well, you know what
feedback.
I
And
find.
you've got an MBA.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to overblow it, but I suppose that, to be fair, I've got quite a lot of paperwork now, and I've also got 17 years of work experience. And I think what happens is in the recruiter world, if you're trying to target multinational companies' senior management, those people are headhunted. They're not recruiters.
Right.
So I need to somehow get headhunters to approach me that have my CV, which is it's a subtle difference as opposed to sort of just the Robert
The
Half
recruiter
sending them my CV and then, because they're looking for just a guy to be a financial controller or a guy to be a product controller to just come do the line roll or whatever,
Which is now you've moved beyond that.
That's what I think. I think my experience is too much for them for that, because they obviously know what the salary range is. So they will look at my CV and be like, oh, but this job is an operational level role, and this guy's going to want too much salary. So I think that's what they don't want to even bother with the discussion.
Yeah.
If you apply online to jobs, there's this applicant tracking software. So your CV first gets filtered by some computer, depending on if you meet keywords and that kind of stuff. So that's a whole game that you have to play, that you have to sort of make your CV for every application, which is super tedious.
Okay.
But I had a good interview last week with a company that's in the commodity space. The role is a financial control head for UK, and which doesn't appeal to me on paper initially, but when I kind of got into the weeds, it's actually a combination of financial control and product control. And actually, they don't really seem to have anything in place yet. So it's more about.
So it would be like a new challenge.
It's more about establishing the function. They've got like a Mickey Mouse function in place, but like, for example, one of the things they want is, oh, can you help us to make us have a month end? We don't have a month end. We kind of scrambling at year end to get audited financials done, but we don't have a month end process. So I was like, well, there's a lot of like work, effectively project work to be done again. So then that started to appeal to me. So they said to me they'll get back to me this Friday. So I'll see how they do. It was very nice. And the hiring manager there, who's the head of the EU financial control there, he's a South African guy and a CA. So that was that's where I'm at now. And I think what I know you like talking about sort of retirement savings and planning for your future and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so maybe we can sort of segue into that.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
I think what was really good was when I left Barclays to go to CLSA. There was a lot of people losing their jobs at Barclays.
Okay.
And I got the sense I'm going to lose my job. And that's why I went and looked for a job, and I found the one at CLSA.
Okay.
And but in that moment, I had this huge panic. I had my girlfriend that was living with me at the time, but she's not from South Africa. And if I didn't get a new job, I would get. At that time, I was not a permanent resident yet. So I would have had to leave Hong Kong, and I was like, wow. But now I've been living it up in Hong Kong, and I've got a bunch of credit card debt again, and
Okay.
And I took stock of my life. I got this job at CLSA, and I took stock of my life. And there, when I left Barclays to go to CLSA, I was off for about 2 or 3 weeks. And my wife said, let's just go on holiday. Let's go to Kota Kinabalu. And I remember she still paid for the whole holiday. I didn't even have the money to do that. I was up
sure.
And she paid for that. And we went.
Well, she's definitely a keeper then.
Kota Kinabalu in Malaysia. It's on it's not the Malaysia by where Kuala Lumpur is. Part of
Okay.
Malaysia is on the Indonesian island. I
Okay.
forget the name now, but it's there. And we went there, and there, when I left there to come back to Hong Kong, at the airport there was this book about financial planning.
Oh wow. Okay.
Right, little book. It was I think 48 pages or something, and it's like not A4, like this kind of size, right? But
Yes.
but
A5.
whatever, A5, yeah.
Yeah.
And 48 pages or whatever, and it was written by a Malaysian guy. Even the English was very broken English or whatever.
Oh wow. Okay.
And I don't know, it probably wasn't the most like advanced financial planning book.
But I think basic financial planning isn't advanced. It's really just about starting to think about it, I think.
But
Yeah.
like what this guy did is he broke down, the best way to describe it is he broke finances into 3 categories.
Okay.
And he said one is about your day-to-day life, which I would sort of in accounting terms call income and expenses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
One is about the risks in your life.
Okay.
Which common people understand as insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And one is about wealth creation.
Yeah.
Which in financial services is called asset management. Right?
Yes. Yes.
So once those 3 buckets had been put aside, and that I had to think about finance in those buckets, it sort of opened up a whole world for me. Right?
Yeah.
I suddenly realized, okay, I need to have a budget for my life.
Day to day. Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah.
I need to think about what insurance do I need. Right?
Because one of the biggest things I think is that, especially probably still at our age now, even is especially if you haven't built up a lot of assets on the third bucket, the biggest thing you need to protect is your ability to work, right? So if you can't create the income through disability or sickness or some kind of disease, you need to cover for that, because then you're going to lose your biggest wealth creation tool, which is you yourself.
Yeah. No, exactly. And so then that happened, and so there was, and when I thought about insurance, to me, I lumped everything that is a risk into insurance. So I even consider retirement as insurance. I see that,
Okay.
I treat medical as insurance.
Yes. It is. Yeah, definitely.
So all the things that can go wrong in my life, right?
Yeah.
I treat it as that.
Okay.
And then in that third bucket, there was this wealth creation thing, and I started to then say, okay, well, now I want to start saving money. I did that. I had life insurance for me and my wife, and obviously I had medical aid, and I had a retirement plan in place and that type of stuff. And I did a spreadsheet of a budget. What is my expenses every month, and how do I make sure I have enough money left over?
In order to do the savings and then invest.
In order to do that stuff. And then when I did and then I stuck to that bloody spreadsheet. I was like, literally, if I had $5 a day for lunch, I had $5 a day for lunch, and it was like not negotiable. Wow. And I would skip.
I think the other important thing with budgeting is first of all, people need to actually start with a budget and what it could look like. But then you've got to monitor it, you've got to track it and see how well you did the following.
I was sitting there every month with my bank statement, like putting the numbers into the spreadsheet.
And there's actually apps and companies that do that now, so that actually pull your bank data for you and help you with that type of thing.
No, it's completely automated.
But a lot of people don't even take that step. They it's too much, it's too scary, it's too daunting. They know that their budgeting is going to be fucked for a while. And so they don't take that first step in terms of creating the budget, then tracking it, and then being honest and saying, what am I going to cut? What am I going to,
for me, what was the big challenge there was I was like hell bent on bucket number 2 and bucket number 3 are not negotiable.
Okay.
I was like, I have to first pay my insurance, and then I have to first pay my savings money into bucket number 3. And whatever's left, I have to live my life like that.
But that's one of the best ways to approach it, because especially if that money that you're doing for bucket 2 and 3, if you know what that is, because you've run a couple of numbers, if that leaves your bank account, you do usually make do with what's left, because you have no choice.
It's human nature. Like that's why people who get a 20% increase suddenly next month, they have no money at the end of the month, because you just
and if you say, I'm gonna save what's left at the end of the month, you're gonna have nothing left.
You got the first pay yourself and then pay everyone else.
Exactly, big principle. Pay yourself.
So then but now bucket number 3, I was like, okay, well, what must I invest in? I don't even know about investing or whatever. And around about this time is when I started to study CFA.
Okay.
Right. Just coincidentally, CFA was actually one night. It was a Saturday night, and I was about 2 bottles of red wine in, and I was on my computer, and somebody, I don't know what I was watching on YouTube or something, and somebody was speaking about CFA, and I thought, you know what, I need to do CFA. That was a very drunken moment decision.
Yeah.
But then I was signed up and committed. I paid and swiped and everything.
Oh, really? Wow.
No, I was like, yeah, let me just
went in.
Okay, here's my credit card details. Like one of those moments.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, these books arrive in the mail, and
wow.
I was like, oh, shoot.
Yeah, I think for some people that don't know, CFA is a chartered financial analyst, and it's basically the education that most people get that are managing your money. Asset managers, investment managers that are managing your money usually have a CFA designation and qualification.
So the way the course works is it's got 3 levels. Level 1 is sort of just an introduction to all the different concepts and stuff that you need to know, broadly speaking. But it's a lot of different books within lots of themes and lots of sort of categories. There's a lot of stuff to learn. Level 2 is kind of the same categories, but the emphasis is valuation.
How to value, how to value a company that you want to invest in on the stock exchange.
How to value a real estate asset, all different asset classes. How do you value them?
Okay.
And broadly speaking, it all comes down to discounting future cash flows. But they might have different terminology or different principles that apply. But broadly speaking, that's what's going on there. So level 2, lots of people says is difficult, but it's actually because it's number crunching and discounting future cash flows and stuff, and understanding how to build those discount models. And if you've done lots of exercises, I suppose you become good at that, and then you can pass level 2. So that's how I ended up passing. And then level 3 is about portfolio management.
Okay, putting it all together.
And if you have like different asset classes together, then in what ratios you need to have them, and that kind of stuff. Correlation.
Asset classes being securities, equities, property, bonds, cash.
Exactly, commodities, cash. Yeah, exactly right. So that's portfolio management, and I actually was signed up for level 3, and I got the books, but then COVID came.
Really, eh? And then you went into an MBA straight after that.
No, well, I actually was meant to write. I was meant to write. I can't remember where it was, but basically, like halfway through my MBA or something would have been the CFA. So I kind of already started the CFA and been working the material, and then MBA was starting, and I would then write the exam.
Sure, that's quite a bit.
But I kind of thought like it was a little bit of a crossover, but I thought I could handle it. But then COVID came and they canceled all the exams and shit.
But still an option, right? I mean, you could do CFA level 3 and maybe go into that.
Well, it's just a lot happened. COVID happened, and then we moved to the UK, and I've then been unemployed, and so like I just got to time it right.
Of course, no, sure.
I will definitely finish it. I don't know if I'll ever get the charter though, because part of getting the charter is also
experience.
You need to have 4 years investment decision making experience.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'll ever be able to qualify for that. Although,
because usually a designation includes the actual education, which is the course you've done. It includes experience, and then I think ethics. Ethics is the other.
Well, there is ethics in the CFA. There is a lot.
Exactly. But the main thing that you have to get the designation is actual experience in that field.
Yeah, and the 50% of your time has to be spent on investment decision making.
Right.
But I would say that sort of the equity analysts and the portfolio manager kind of people, that's the most like directly exactly what is in CFA syllabus.
Yeah.
Like I work in product control. So I was doing the P&L for the guys in the front office and applying similar principles. But I don't know if that sort of is good enough as investment decision-making experience,
I think you could argue it. But anyway, so I mean, going back to you and now deciding for yourself on bucket 3 with investment, you obviously had some experience.
And then I started buying unit trusts because HSBC you could just click and buy, and then they would load these fact sheets, and you see every single fund under the sun. They must have had hundreds, and it was like income funds and equity funds and real estate. So I was like, oh, I remember seeing equity in my CFA textbook, and then I started to join the dots. That's why I said to you earlier, when I was product control, I was still quite green.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Even though I could do the spreadsheets, I never sort of knew what I was talking about,
Yeah. Okay.
Now the sort of pennies were starting to drop, and I was like, okay, I see what these asset classes are. And then I quickly realized, okay, listen, the fixed income world is not where people seem to make their money just by holding and hoping.
Yeah, that's also more conservative. You're going to get some return, but is it going to keep up with inflation?
Well, if you're looking at coupons, then that's a low return because it's a guaranteed return. But the game of fixed income is more about figuring out what the future interest rates will be, and then will bond prices drop or rise?
Right.
So that's a game that's, I think, is a very specialized game. I don't think that.
Yeah.
And it's not as intuitive, I don't think, as equities.
As equities, yeah.
Equities is like, is this a good company? Do they make money? Like, do they have a good product?
There's some quantitative analysis with equities, but then obviously some.
But most people can understand if you say, oh yeah, that's value. If I say Coca-Cola is a good company, like without saying anything about the company, you're gonna go, yeah, he's probably right because I know what Coca-Cola is. I've seen the brand, I've drank it, I've tasted it. Lots of people like it. Like just intuitively, it sounds like I might be right. Now, obviously, if we do the analysis, maybe I'm wrong, but just intuitively, there's people resonate much more with equities than they do with fixed income.
With fixed income.
And anyway, so then I kind of started getting into this, and I was like, okay, well, I also noticed at that moment, I was like, for some reason, whenever Japan is up, US is down, or when US is up, Japan is down. And then I realized that I figured out there's this carry trade that's going on between Japan and United States the whole time. For many, many, many years, because the inflation was so low in Japan, Japanese investors were investing in the US.
Okay.
But then whenever there's problems in the US, they might withdraw their investment from the US.
Okay.
And because the volumes are so high, this is just what's driving the currency exchange rates to do that the whole time. They sort of balance up and down.
Okay.
I was like, okay, well, maybe that's a good way to hedge my bets.
Okay.
I'll invest in a US fund and I'll invest in a Japanese fund.
Right. Okay.
So when this one's going down, and that slowly but surely, and by investing real money, it just drives your ability to be interested in the markets and how does the market work or whatever. And then you slowly, like that sort of anecdote, like there's lots of stuff like that happened over the years. I was like, well, actually this, actually that. And then I realized about diversification, but you realize, okay, diversification is one thing, but when I did this trading course, we realized actually portfolios of more than like 20 stocks or something is the marginal benefit of the diversification is nothing.
Nothing exactly.
When you see these portfolios of like 900 stocks or something, you're not really achieving much. The diversification power is only in the first 20 or something.
But so tell me, by the sounds of it, you were able to implement quite a lot of this and buy sort of funds quite easily on your own. I mean, you didn't need to have an intermediary.
Now I had my retirement savings growing in the background, and I had my sort of personal funds, whatever, in the account on HSBC, right?
Yeah.
And it was never single stocks. I was never, because I worked at the bank, if you wanted to trade single stocks, I needed to get compliance permission.
Okay.
Because they think I'm insider trading or something.
Yeah. But the difference there being was a unit trust, or in America they also refer to as unit trust, is a mutual fund. It's really just an asset manager deciding on what basket of single stocks he's putting together or she's putting together.
Because an asset manager makes the decisions, my compliance department didn't care if I was buying those assets or those investments.
Yes, okay.
If I buy single stocks, then they think, oh, hang on, does our research team cover that stock? Because then
because otherwise there's insider trading.
Yeah, so there's a risk of that. And the compliance department is just like, if you're going to trade single stocks, you have to run everything by us. It's like, we first have to give you approval. And then that process takes 14 days.
Okay.
So now if you own a single stock, let's say I own, I don't know, Microsoft or Apple or something, and suddenly the share price starts dropping, or there's a global financial crisis, whatever. I can't sell my stock. I have to first tell compliance I want to sell my stock.
Oh my word! So you could put yourself in a bind.
So I was just like, okay, I'm not going to bother with this. It's too much hassle. And that's why I did the trading course when I was unemployed afterwards, because I was like, I don't have compliance on my back. Right?
Okay.
So but anyway, at a sort of macro level, you can still buy unit trusts and sort of think about macro things, what's happening with inflation,
Of course.
that kind of stuff, and then still make some sort of informed decision.
Mm.
And I did okay. Part of it was luck, I suppose, because there was this era since the financial crisis has been an era of low interest rates and lots of good monetary policy around the world.
Yeah.
So part of it was just lucky and sort of following the trend. But I do think I made some good calls here and there.
Yeah.
Definitely made some bad calls. I remember one year I got a very, very good bonus, and I took my whole bonus and I went and bought a diverse range of ETFs across the whole Chinese market.
Oh, wow.
And the next month or something, it was August of 2015, and just as like this, the whole market just started crashing. Everything just started crashing so even though I was diversified across real estate, industrials, financials,
everything went down.
Everything was just crashing because in China, like it's very much dictated by the policy. The government just decides they don't want this something anymore, and then it's over. They just were like with the Ant Financial from Alibaba. Their IPO was going to be the biggest IPO in history. And then they were like, oh no, Jack Ma didn't say the nice thing about the president or whatever, so cancel the IPO. Like billions. So they just make these decisions that just suck completely like upend the market,
Yeah.
So I learned my lesson, and so I became quite paid a lot of attention and made sure that I didn't have all my eggs in the Chinese market.
Yeah.
After that, I had them all over the place. But in the long run, I did well. And then when I left Hong Kong, I cashed out my retirement savings and I had my personal savings. So I had quite a lot of money and debt-free and quite a healthy amount of money, especially considering that I'd paid for this expensive MBA. I'd had a very, very luxurious wedding in the Philippines. I'd been traveling for 10 years with my wife. And Hong Kong is not a cheap city. Hong Kong is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
So taking all of that into account, I was like, wow, I'm actually leaving with quite a lot.
Okay.
And then so I came here. So I guess my key takeaway was, and then obviously I've been unemployed and I've been living off those savings.
Right.
I think that's sort of the crux of what I'm trying to get to. Is I thought, wow, I'm just going to move into the UK and it'll be plain sailing from here.
Especially because you thought you'd get a job much quicker, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. And I thought it would be plain sailing. And as it turned out, I didn't get a job. Now we can debate all the reasons why I didn't get a job, but the bottom line is like life threw me a curveball here. Right? And it's really like been a big, big blow to everything, to confidence, to whatever,
and your money,
and my money and everything. But if I didn't have that money,
yes, you would have been even more screwed.
I don't know if I'd still be married. I don't know, like with my wife. People's love is one thing, but at the end of the day, they say, "But when love goes out the back door, the money goes out. When the money goes out the front door, the love goes out the back door." So, and I think that's true, But because I've been able to pay my half of the bills every month or whatever, my wife has been under that pressure, and she could probably support me if she had to, but it would involve sacrifice on her part. She would not be able to do the things that she likes to do or whatever, and that would create tension. So luckily I had this nice nest egg to fall back on and to sort of keep me going while I'm trying to find something. I think that's the key lesson is because I developed this sort of routine of having my budget, and over time that budget thing becomes quite easy because you become so ingrained into what is my budget that you just know. You even know when your bank statements arrive or whatever, you know what the balance should be.
They're not a surprise, and they're not a surprise to you.
What to expect,
And I think that's amazing, man. I think that's a really good story and key takeaway for someone else maybe listening is that you kind of took it on, and it can also be interesting and fun as well to do it.
I tell the story because a lot of the people on your show, it sounds to me whenever I've watched, sounds more like entrepreneurial. I'm more like the salaried guy that had a job 9 to 5. Well, 9 to 9 or whatever.
Yeah.
But
however, you went across the world to go and get a job, so that's interesting enough as well.
Yeah. And then there was another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Which is maybe like steering a little bit off the business side of things, but
no, all good.
I do think that business and the economy is also tied to politics.
Yeah.
And there was a lesson that I learned in MBA. I had this lecturer. I did a course called Applied Value Investing.
Okay.
And the lecturer was from Columbia University in America. And his name is Paul Johnson. And he was also my macroeconomics lecturer.
Okay.
And just to give some context, the applied value investing course that he lectures
Okay.
was famously driven by Benjamin Graham, who wrote the book The Intelligent Investor, that is what inspired Warren Buffett.
Right. Okay.
And Benjamin Graham was also from Columbia University. So,
Okay.
so I'm having the course.
And value investing being that you kind of look for a good company, a good stock that's undervalued, that you get in early, like Warren Buffett, and over time the real value of the company is then reflected in the stock price.
Exactly. It's an underpriced stock, and I think maybe that's a good another sort of, before I forget about it, another good lesson that I learned is, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, but the difference between value and price.
Right.
And price is something that is determined by supply and demand. So when you look at the stock price, it's just telling you like how much people are willing to sell for and how much people are willing to buy for.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't tell you it's a good company or a bad company. It just tells you what's the going price.
Yeah. At this point.
Completely based on supply and demand.
Yeah.
On the flip, but when you trade that stock or that asset, right, the monetary impact at the end of the day will be determined by the price. Right. On the flip side, though, if you're trying to talk about does something have intrinsic value, the answer is you have to do a valuation. And that's a subjective thing because you and me might not think the same about certain things. We could try and be scientific, and we can look at quantifying cash flows and quantifying discount rates and those type of things and work out a valuation. But even in quantifying those things, we have to make assumptions, and you and I might differ, and we might come up with different valuations. And only when I know my value can I compare it to the price and say, should I buy or should I not buy? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Do I think it's a good price or do I think it's a bad price?
Bad price, yeah.
And I think people sort of, when they're debating companies and stocks and stuff, half the time they're debating the price, and half they're debating the value, and they're sort of mixing and matching these things, but they're not seeing it as two variables that we need to compare to each other.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So that was a key lesson that I learned somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I had this applied value investing, and that was interesting. And yes, you're right. Value is looking for a good price relative to the intrinsic value, right? Yeah. And that's why Warren Buffett always said, I'm an owner of companies. I'm not interested in the price. I'm looking at the value, and then if I think it's a good company, I buy it, and I become a part owner. And a lot of it's true. A lot of it's stocks in his company. Geico Insurance, I think he's been invested in for very, very long, right? And so on. Like even Apple, he's been in for quite a long time now. And when he divested from IBM to switch over to Apple, he was in IBM for very, very long.
Yeah.
So that's the game, and that's a long-term game, the value investing. Anyway, so Paul Johnson in the macroeconomics class, I don't know what we were talking about, but he went through a lot of the different theories or guys from the different schools of economics and how they thought about that, which obviously there's a conflict. Different people think differently about how the market should react and the economy should react. And he went into this whole discussion where he spoke about thinking about a problem from an individual perspective and thinking about a problem from a collective perspective. And when you do this, you will understand the politics of the world.
Okay.
Right? And then I started, if you take any simple example, for example, I live here in the UK, and one of the most famous things that every British person will always tell you about is the BBC. But if they're not talking about the BBC, what they talk about is the NHS.
Okay.
And the NHS is the National Health Service. And this is paid for. Every single person that works pays national insurance as part of their tax. But it's taken off your pay slip every month. You pay national insurance. And obviously, the more you earn, the more national insurance you pay. And because everybody is paying this tax, it means that everybody, whether you're working or not working, there's health service and you can go to the doctor. Right. So now, if I compare this to Hong Kong, in Hong Kong, I don't know, they apparently have a government hospital and stuff that you can go to. And it's apparently pretty good. But I certainly had a medical insurance, and I went to private medical care, and I went to the doctor.
Yeah.
That was
So
what everybody.
similar to how it is in South Africa.
Yeah, it felt
Everyone.
exactly like South Africa.
Mm.
And the doctors were extremely good, but they were very, very expensive.
Mm.
And I would say borderline unethical, that they would actually very much encourage you to come back,
Okay.
right?
Right.
To in the way that they worked, and like making sure that you have to go to the specialist for this and the specialist for that, and if you go, a trip to the doctor became a 6-month journey that you went on, right?
Yeah. Wow.
You know, of like
Yeah.
spending money on
Yeah.
all the places you had to go to, and everything. You know, yes, you've got medical insurance, but you always have to pay the little bit, your sort of excess. And so that's how it worked there. And to be fair, the UK's NHS is pretty good. It's not bad, even though it's government. It's pretty good quality. And you know, I suppose different areas with high council tax bands have got pretty good NHS.
Yeah.
And the more like lower bands and stuff maybe has not as luxurious or whatever. But overall, I would say it's pretty good. And bottom line is you get it for free. But now the question is, what's fair? Right? If you think about it from the perspective of the individual would argue that the Hong Kong system is fair. I worked very hard. I took my hard-earned money and I went and bought myself medical insurance. And then when I was sick, I could go to the doctor and I paid for my doctor. And I don't care about other people and what happens to them.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm an individual. I think about it from an individual perspective. And if I can be so responsible to take care of my own medical problems, why can't other people take care of their own medical problems? And this is a very rational argument. There's nothing wrong with this. It's a very rational, thought out way of thinking. On the other hand, though, you could argue that, well, if poor people can't go to the doctor, then they will stay sick. And if they stay sick, the disease can spread. And then other people get sick. And if everybody gets sick and is staying at home, then they're not at work and the economy is not productive. And that's not good. That's not good for society as a whole. So what could we do instead to make sure that society doesn't get sick?
Yeah.
So that's the way that the UK thinks about it. And that they said, well, then everybody has to foot the bill. We all have to chip in, yeah, and we have to pay. And yes, at the individual level, it will be unfair. The high earners are going to be paying a lot of money.
Subsidizing. Yeah.
A lot of money so that all of the people that are unemployed can have medical care. Right. But that's in the interest of the greater good. And that's also a rational way of thinking about things. It's not irrational to think of it like that. Right? The point is, I'm not going to try to solve for who's right and who's wrong. The point is, having the awareness of the individual and the collective makes you able to think about a problem from different angles.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at politics, everything that people is arguing about in politics, when you really break down their problems, it always comes down to one of these two, that somebody is having an individualistic argument.
And others are thinking about the collective. You
know, and that's just the bottom line. And the real answer is you're both right, right? But you're on the other side of the table and you have to compromise. Right?
Yeah.
How do we reach the compromise? That's the real answer.
That's interesting because I've actually, in a way, I would say almost my own personal political philosophy is, in fact, realizing that and trying to find a way already in my own thinking to compromise. Because, for instance, if I look at, I guess if I would summarize my political philosophy, and by political, I also mean in terms of how do you approach it economically. And there's obviously your socialistic and your capitalistic view. And the one, the one which is thinking more about the collective is more socialistic. And the other one is the individual thinking is more capitalistic. And I think society could probably work better in any event if you take the best of both worlds in some respect. And simply the way that I put it is that I do think things like education and healthcare, you do need to have a socialistic view about it. And other than that, when it comes to individual effort, everything else above that, because also you can't have equality and some level of equity if everyone isn't on the same educational level and isn't given the right start.
Yeah, you're right. let me just double click on that, because there's another sort of subtle nuance that I think people sort of trip over when they talk about it, right? So for every capitalist out there, the boogeyman is socialism, right? And they will just like reject it outright. But I think what people need to realize, because a lot of the people that makes the arguments for sort of social welfare often refers to the Scandinavian countries like Denmark and Norway and that, and says, look at how they have it and so on. And if you go look at those countries, they are democratic. The people have all voted to have that in place, right? Number one. Number two, if you go drill down into how is it funded and you look at the tax rates of the country, you will see that the corporate tax rates are very low, but the individual tax rates are very, very, very high.
Yeah.
So in a way, the individuals are paying for themselves to have all these
benefits anyway.
Benefits, right? So this means that they don't have socialism. They have a social safety net.
Yeah.
And when you go into Karl Marx and read about socialism and what is socialism, and it's a stepping stone to communism, and the sort of the crux there is about the means of production and controlling the means of production. And I think what capitalists think about when they hear the word social, etc., anything, they just jump straight into the Karl Marx socialism means of production thing, and then they say, "No way, this is this is Venezuela, this is Cuba, this is USSR. We don't even want to talk. It's not even open for discussion."
Yeah,
and I think what a lot of the collectivist kind of people are actually trying to say is we need to have a social safety net.
Safety net, yeah.
Not we want
safety net, and I think what I was talking about is a level of everyone starting from an equitable point of view, or start. You know, so you can never have a sort of
it makes sense.
An economy, you know, or having, if everyone hasn't had the same opportunities from an educational point of view and even from a healthcare point of view, because it starts at an early age.
It makes sense. The Scandinavian countries are very, very successful, you know, across the board, and it's almost like the social safety net is the cost of doing capitalism.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that makes sense.
That's kind of how I think about it. So I'm personally not opposed to it. You know, even though I can understand the guy that says, "But why must I pay?" Right? I can understand. It's rational that question, but there is a counter argument, and I think over time that it's very difficult to implement that in a country like South Africa, which maybe there's a lot of disparity between the haves and the have-nots, right?
Yeah.
It's easy for the Scandinavians that have fully established everything to say, okay, well, let's just keep having a social safety net.
No, sure. And obviously in South Africa, you've got the problem is that we're already paying high tax. We don't have a lot of social benefits, a big social safety net. And it's about managing those funds correctly as well, because you've got to put a government in place that is going to adequately and properly manage the tax revenue that's brought in and how to allocate that properly. In order to have some of those social safety nets, especially like education and healthcare, and maybe some form of retirement, or pension savings, which is another level, to make sure that is actually managed properly and the funds allocated in the right way. And that's obviously a big problem with corruption in South Africa.
So now let me ask you, because I've not been to South Africa since 2014, right? And, you know, when you live overseas, it's a very different experience to when you live in the country, right? Like on the ground, you know. If I see news about South Africa, I see the dramatic news. So I remember, I definitely saw the news of them burning shopping malls down somewhere like a year ago or something, or whatever.
Yeah, in KwaZulu-Natal,
Yeah, so that kind of stuff definitely goes global and we will see it or whatever. But I don't get all the nuance of South African politics. But I do feel, I don't know who is now really able to oppose the ANC government effectively. But I feel like South Africa needs to have a different government so that they have a new benchmark. Because I feel like the benchmark right now has always been, oh, but this is still better than apartheid. This is still better than, like, apartheid was the benchmark, and this is definitely better than apartheid. But people doesn't sort of challenge how to grow the what we have now into something better. So how do you feel with the elections coming next year? Do you think that there's a chance that the ANC will even lose? Do you think that there will be an effective new government, or do you think it's just more of the same to come?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I haven't really thought about it too much. It's something that I don't try and think about a lot from a South African point of view. I don't think, unfortunately, the biggest potential challenger to the ANC being the DA has all its ducks in a row. Unfortunately, that's the main thing, and it's a pity. I think in a lot of ways they could have done better with some of the leadership that they weren't able to keep. And I think it is starting to, unfortunately, in many ways, and I don't know enough about it, but look like pretty much like a white opposition party in many ways, unfortunately, and that's not great. I think the one thing that is happening that is maybe positive and could be an option, and that's what I've always thought in terms of a democracy, it needs to start on a local level. So a lot of what is happening that I've started looking at, and very briefly, and I'm no expert at this, is independent candidates at a local municipal level starting to run independently. And I think one of the things that is happening, the way I understand it, is Musi Maimane, funnily enough, who the DA wasn't able to keep for whatever reason, and we'll never know the real reasons for that, is looking at a party which consolidates a lot of those independent candidates, and then on a national level has some kind of stake in national government. But however, when that filters down, it's really local government independent candidates that have a real understanding of their local communities are actually then representing at a local level. And I think that could maybe be a way that things could work.
I think that's right. If I think about is here in the UK, like a lot of people says, call your local council.
Yes.
Whatever, right?
Yeah.
Talk to him, and then go complain about your local problem, whatever. Because if it's a consistent problem with a lot of people, then actually the democratic process makes him go up the chain and sort it out or whatever.
Yeah.
And in the US, they have the decentralized government where the states have a lot of power. And the philosophy of that is actually, because that's on a much bigger country, right? But the philosophy there is actually saying that the most localized people should have the most say of what is going on in their life.
Yeah. No, and I think the way it's often been is that the democratic model sometimes doesn't work because it's a bottom down kind of approach where you've got national level is doing some good things, but it doesn't filter down on a practical everyday local level. So I think the bottom up approach, which is starting to happen in some respects, is what could actually work. Because the thing is, democracy doesn't work if in my neighborhood and my town things aren't working properly, and I'm relying on national government who's thinking about bigger strategic things, isn't doing what's needed at a local level. And I mean, that would be the sort of short answer.
Maybe that's just the evolution of South Africa's democracy. We'll get there.
But I think there are changes happening. I think there's, I don't think the ANC would necessarily lose if you're asking me that question, but I think it's slowly they're being challenged from the bottom up, and they've lost local government support, and they've definitely even provincial is looking like it's being challenged. And I think over time that will change the demographics. And I think everyone's always been somewhat agreed that a multi-party sort of situation in South Africa would always maybe work the best. However, what it's also done and shown is that in some respects you can stagnate any kind of decision making because there's not enough of a majority, but there's also not enough of a minority or multi-party system happening where then decisions are stagnated. But I don't understand enough about sort of government and things and how that works to really comment. But
no, I mean, I don't think.
In general, I'll give you my real view on democracy generally, and that is, I don't know what the alternative is, but I do think it's kind of, if you think about what democracy is, it's a bunch of us, like, we've got some good ideas and we've got some good education, but we also do stupid things, And it's a bunch of us like varsity friends deciding that between us, one of us idiots is going to run the country, and we put a lot of emphasis on that. So it's just on a bigger scale in the country. I don't necessarily think that it, yes, there's systems and processes in place, but essentially we're just making one of us and deciding that one of us is going to now make some decisions over the rest of us. And I don't know if that's really the best system of government.
Yeah, it's tricky. Anyway, we could probably talk about politics forever, but
yeah,
my main kind of thing is I hope South Africa can improve a lot in the future, because when I talk to my parents, always the Wi-Fi drops because it's load shedding.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it was load shedding when I left South Africa, so I'm just like, yes, come on.
Yeah, there's definitely some of those things. But listen, I'm going to have to
wrap it up
a bit. And we didn't really get to talk too much about beach bats, which is what you do for fun.
Let me give you the elevator pitch.
The elevator pitch of what does JP do for fun?
Okay, so for fun, I like to play my guitar.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right.
I've always just sort of played like a campfire style play guitar.
Yeah.
And then while I was in Hong Kong, I ended up in a band, but not to play guitar. They wanted me to play bass, so I ended up learning the bass, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then obviously being married to a Filipina and going to the Philippines a lot, I ended up learning how to scuba dive. And I love scuba diving. And I would recommend scuba diving to anybody, because first of all, it's a whole world under the sea that people don't even know exists when you live above the sea.
Yeah.
And it's the
potentially scary as well, but yeah.
It's a guaranteed way to not have to listen to anybody.
Yeah, very quiet time.
It doesn't matter what my wife wants to tell me. I just
can't.
I can't hear you. That's all. So that's what I do. And obviously I love watching rugby, Springbok rugby. We've got the World Cup coming up. So
yeah. Okay, lekker, man. It's been good chatting. Hopefully I can piece the thing together. I'll see what I can do, but either way, it's been nice chatting.
All right, John. No, it was great to catch up with you again, and nice to see you. And let's do it again when you've got a few other episodes under the belt.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. We can definitely maybe talk a bit more about politics, but let's see. I think neither of us are qualified enough to do it, but it's interesting to chat about it. Anyway.
Well, then we're going to have a drink.
Because these days it's a big thing to be qualified in what you're talking about.
When I have debates with people about politics, I've realized they know the headlines. They haven't read the article.
But I think that's me. Like, I've also just read the headline. That's why I don't like to comment on it, because I actually haven't read too much about what's really going on. But yeah. Cool, man. But have a good one. And hopefully you find a job, man.
Yeah, I think I'm almost there.
Cool, man.
Take care.
Dude. Cheers.
Bye.